Well, joining us on the broadcast is Salvatore Babones, American sociologist. A very warm welcome. Many thanks for speaking to us here at News9 Live. Very quickly, how are you looking at this assassination attempt that has now been foiled? It was unsuccessful, but does this change the dynamics and how people are going to view the upcoming U.S. elections for good? Over to you, Mr. Salvatore.
Of course, it's shocking but not surprising. Many people have been talking about the potential for an assassination attempt on Donald Trump in response to all of the very extreme rhetoric about Donald Trump being a threat to democracy, a new Hitler, that if the United States does not vote Democratic in this election, this will be the last election in American history, that Donald Trump will murder his political opponents if he becomes president again. So it's not surprising in light of that kind of rhetoric that someone would make an attempt like this. What is surprising is that the attempt came so close to success. That is clearly a failure of security. Now, I'm no security expert, but the security experts that I've seen interviewed on American television have said that the first thing you would do in securing something like this site would be to secure the overlooking rooftops. That is to make sure that someone cannot be on a rooftop with a straight view of the stage. And not only did that not happen, but Americans in the crowd had been pointing at the rooftop because they saw the assassin at least a minute before the assassin began shooting, and trying to call this out to police and Secret Service, who apparently did not respond, or, I guess because of their professionalism, did not want to be distracted. But nonetheless, had they allowed themselves to be distracted, the shooting would have been prevented.
Well, you're absolutely right. It seems like it was, in fact, an intelligence failure. You've got the CIA, you've got the Secret Service, you've got the FBI, and yet, you're absolutely right, the attempt came so close to being successful as well. But, United States, it's deeply polarized. We've seen it time and again. And right now, with the advent of social media, I was taking a look at some of the social media posts that are now coming about. It's hardcore extremism. You're either a Republican or a MAGA supporter, or you're a Democrat. And, the problem with the Democrats at this point in time is that there's a lot of confusion and conundrum in terms of the support that's backing Joe Biden. Do you think this is going to further vitiate the atmosphere in the United States?
It's very interesting that you used the phrase intelligence failure instead of the phrase security failure. And that's interesting because we've been told for the last 10 years or so that the primary threat in the United States, a threat to democracy, was coming from the alt-right, the far right, from neo-Nazis, from white supremacists, when in fact it's been very clear to anyone who watches the news that the so-called Antifa are the more serious violent threat to America. That is, people who've taken it upon themselves to declare themselves anti-fascists. Antifa is shorthand for anti-fascist, who have been hijacking political events ever since the Black Lives Matter violence in the year 2000. So this really was not only an intelligence failure, but an intelligence failure caused by a politicization of intelligence, which is to say, anyone who's sensible knows that the far right in the United States is not a major security threat. We've seen very little violence coming from the kinds of gun owners who support President Trump. Now, I don't say that as a Trump supporter. I say that as a matter of factuality. We are not seeing armed rallies of people in support of Donald Trump, regardless of what the mainstream media in the United States would like us to believe. Instead, what we're seeing is anarchist violence directed against former President Trump and his supporters. You can go anywhere in the United States and wear a Joe Biden for President hat or bumper sticker and no one will bother you. But if you were to wear a MAGA hat, a Make America Great Again hat, in many parts of the United States, you would be harassed. If you had a Trump bumper sticker on your car, you will have your car vandalized if you are in a majority Democratic area. And that's something that the American political establishment has not wanted to reckon with. It hasn't wanted to face the violence emanating from within its own ranks.
Well, this bullying, Mr. Babones, this harassment of sorts that you're talking about, do you think that's going to change with this assassination attempt now?
It won't change because of the attempt, but what will change is that Trump's supporters are increasingly emboldened to say that they support Donald Trump openly and in public. Take, for example, Elon Musk, the most prominent today, the most prominent supporter of Donald Trump, perhaps in the world. He only declared his endorsement for Donald Trump in the wake of this assassination attempt. Now, people who may think that Elon Musk is a lifelong Republican should be disabused of that notion. I mean, he is a, publicly pot-smoking, radical environmentalist chief executive of an electric car company. He's not Trump material, but he has become a Trump supporter, has been willing to openly state that. And I think a lot of other executives and professionals like Elon Musk are increasingly willing to take that stand in public, whereas previously they would give their money in private, they would attempt to remain anonymous. We do know that ever since the 2016 election, there has been a social desirability bias against admitting that you were voting for Donald Trump. So consistently, the polls have underrepresented Trump voting. And what we may be seeing in the polls now showing Trump being more popular than Joe Biden, what we may be seeing is not any actual shift in the electorate, but a reduction in that social desirability bias. The fact that people are now willing to publicly state their support for Donald Trump, whereas previously they felt they couldn't.
You know, people back at home, Mr. Babones, are very closely monitoring as to what's happening in the run-up to the presidential race in the United States. People here are worried about what the immigration policies are going to look like. People are also worried about the bilateral trade. I mean, take a look at that huge amount of trade between these two countries. But I'll tell you what, the optics that people are looking at is, number one, you've got Joe Biden with a slew of gaffes, him not being able to climb up the stairs properly. And on the other hand, you now have the former president, Donald Trump, who's been, there's an assassination attempt on him. He falls on the ground, but then he picks himself up with his clenched fist. He's mouthing, fight, fight, fight. Those are two contrasting pictures, and stark contrast at it.
The virility of Donald Trump is truly phenomenal. At nearly 80 years old, it's hard to imagine for any of us that if we had just been shot, and let's not mince words, although Donald Trump was not killed, it was one of his supporters who was killed. Donald Trump was shot. He actually was hit in the ear with a bullet. That after being shot, the first thing he wanted was, let me get my shoes, which is just, that instead of being rushed off to a hospital, he wanted to, have decorum, get his shoes on, look good. And then the second thing was, no, don't pull me off stage. I want a photo opportunity. And to seize that photo opportunity in front of the American flag, it is really remarkable.
And now that people have seen this, this happening, do you think Joe Biden stands a chance?
Look, Trump is what the internet calls a Chad, and it really is incredible. Does Joe Biden stand a chance? Of course he does. Politics are very hard fought in America. Any election victory is always a narrow victory, even if it's large in electoral vote terms. And in a way, this is an opportunity for Joe Biden to redefine his campaign. For the last 6 months, his campaign has been Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. And I have to say, whether it's in India or in the United States, campaigning that your opponent is a threat to democracy is not a route to victory. Joe Biden can no longer use that kind of language because of the assassination attempt. As a result, he will have to now campaign on the issues. Now, whether he can successfully campaign on the issues is another matter, but campaigning on the issues will make him a stronger candidate than it has been. Also, strangely, but nonetheless true, this assassination attempt has taken the focus off Joe Biden, and just at a moment where Joe Biden needed a break. That is, the focus has been on whether or not Joe Biden will step down as Democratic candidate. If next week Joe Biden comes out of the stocks with a very strong presence, with a new campaign message, he can still turn this around. I'm not projecting that he will do that. I'm saying that the politics is always the art of the possible, and that is a possibility.
Well, all right, Mr. Babones, what we're also picking up at this point in time is that the alleged Trump rally shooter, Matthew Crooks, in fact, donated to the Democrat camp, to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
We've got a quick receipt. We'll try and produce it and put it out there for viewers' discretion as well, for their perusal. Thomas Crooks, he's donated about $15 is the receipt that we have with us at this point in time. It says here the occupation is not employed and the employer is again not employed. What does this again tell us about, the larger multitude of the youth? I mean, this is a 20-year-old boy who's, gone on and attempted this shooting.
The Democratic Party in the United States really has to engage with the fact that it has promoted and endorsed this quote-unquote Antifa, anti-fascist violence in the United States. To date, the Democrats have not wanted to face up to this, but the reality is that the Antifa activists, they're a bunch of anarchists, young men who are convinced that they're going to take down the next Adolf Hitler. Democrats have to reckon with the fact that these are not people they want on their side. Now, Republicans do the same. No Republican will endorse the Ku Klux Klan, despite the fact that the Ku Klux Klan, the anti-African American group, despite the fact that they may vote Republican, Republicans want to keep as far away as possible from those people. In the same way, Democrats now really have to take a stand saying we don't support the Antifa violence that has come up again and again at the Black Lives Matter rallies, on the fringes of Trump rallies, in every protest that occurs, even in the anti-Israel protests in America. This acceptance of violence on your own side has to end. These thugs, and by the way, I know thug is a loaded word in India because the word does come from India, but in America, that's the word that's often used. This thuggishness has to end, and Democrats really have to accept that it's not Republicans who've been engaging in election violence in America. It's Democrats who've been engaging in political violence. And hopefully they'll pull back from that precipice and now have a campaign based around the issues.
Well, that's the receipt on your screens, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Babones, for your perusal as well. That's the receipt. It has the name. If you could just remove the top band from our screens, the control room, we could see the name of this person as well. It says right there, you have the city as well. You've got $15 is donation that has been made. And Thomas Matthew Crooks, that's the name of the person, the alleged Trump rally shooter. Now, of course, the entire world was completely shook when it woke up to the news of Donald Trump's assassination attempt. Donald Trump exited the stage with a bleeding ear, fists raised defiantly, urging fight, fight, fight. And in that moment, Mr. Babones, I'm sure you're going to agree, he joined the likes of several other American presidents who have confronted assassination attempts throughout the nation's history. Here's a quick report. Mr. Babones, do stay on with us.
Take a look at what happened.
Gunfire erupted at a Donald Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday, sparking panic in the crowd as Secret Service agents rushed in to swarm around the Republican presidential candidate. Trump emerged with blood on his right cheek and ear, and he defiantly pumped his fist in the air before being ushered to a waiting car. The shooter was dead, and the Secret Service was investigating the shooting as an assassination attempt, a source told Reuters. The Secret Service and the former president's campaign said Trump was safe following the shooting. Another person was in critical condition, said a Washington Post reporter on social media, citing the Butler County District Attorney. The shooter's identity and motives were not immediately clear. The shooting occurred less than 4 months before the November 5th election, when Trump faces Democratic President Joe Biden.
Salvatore Babones, American sociologist, continues to be with us on the broadcast. Mr. Babones, even as we, wrap this particular segment up, we've already spoken about, does it change the U.S. elections for good? Does Joe Biden stand a chance? What happens, to the gun culture over there? U.S. being deeply polarized, is the atmosphere going to vitiate further? And I'm being itched to ask you this question about, of course, what does Trump's return mean for the entire world and India? But before that, very quickly, Mr. Babones, the gun culture, will that again come to light?
No, this is not going to change. In fact, this assassination attempt occurred in one of the highest gun-owning hotspots in the United States, in southwestern Pennsylvania. Butler County, I think, is the second highest gun-owning county in the United States, after Allegheny County, which is also, just abutting that, just southwest of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Trump side, that is, people who support Donald Trump, are thorough supporters of the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees the civil right to own weapons. And the Democratic side wants to increasingly outlaw the ownership of weapons in the United States. That's not going to flip just because of an assassination attempt on Donald Trump. In fact, when there have been school shootings in the United States, so the most horrific form of gun violence against little children, the Republican Party tends to argue that if only teachers also had guns, then these school shootings would be prevented. So I don't think you can look to any change in the U.S. gun culture resulting from this assassination attempt.